Good.
Awesome. Good afternoon, guys. Welcome. It's Whiskey Wednesday. Spirits Guide coming to you guys live. Wachusett Wine and Spirits out here in the WB. We had thunder so loud here yesterday, it shook the building.
Yep. Our buddy lives in Paxton. His house got, not his house, but a tree right next to his house got split right down the middle. Huge tree, too.
It was pretty nasty out there. Yeah, it's weird to hear the sound of your voice.
I sound like that.
So how you doing?
I'm good.
Good?
Yeah, Labor Day weekend coming up. It's probably going to be pretty busy next week.
Yeah.
This week's light. I don't know what it is, but we haven't got a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I feel like same for us. I feel like we stocked up last week.
Yeah, 100%.
And this week is kind of the coast week. Yeah, if you guys are watching, listening, we're open all weekend. We're fully stocked, ready to go. Yeah, kind of the last weekend of summer. Mm-hmm. Ironically, all the summer beers are gone. Yep. So we're straight on into pumpkin beers and Oktoberfest, which we'll talk about on the podcast.
Give you the tip.
That's all you. You keep it. So yeah, here we're talking about rye this week. Ryes and Shine, we're calling this. Kind of inspired, one, by the fact that our Rittenhouse is probably 4 weeks out.
Can't believe I just got that saying just now. I read the post as a Ryes and Shine. Nice.
Yeah.
Rise and shine. Oh my god. Yeah, I was tired when I got home.
I was playing clever with my words.
Right over
and one, understanding that like ryes are super polarizing. Even when you were here in the store, like we deal with a lot of customers. I don't like rye, and or they think they all taste the same. So that was sort of the initial inspiration for this. Was I wanted to show that like they don't all taste the same, and we have nothing against MGP ryes. Love them. We taste a lot of them, but none of these are from MGP. So these are all people that are making their own rye. And not only do they not taste like any other ryes we've had before, but these are 4 completely different ryes that don't taste like each other. And then the more I get into it, and I always kind of knew rye was the original American whiskey well before we made what would become known as bourbon. But the history becomes super, super fascinating. So just sort of a quick little story time with Rich history catch-up. But, and I found a lot of this information in an article written by Dave Peckerell, who's Mount Rushmore of whiskeys, who had a love affair with rye, which is part of the reason he left Maker's Mark, was they wouldn't let him make rye at Maker's. Yeah. And how he ended up at Whistle Pig making rye there. But basically, I mean, we've been distilling as a humanity since the 12th century. Like as soon as we figured out that we could cook fermented things and give them more alcohol, we have. So when we settled this country, we brought that sort of tradition of distilling with us. And again, distilling was just, every farm in America had a distillery on it. And they would distill leftover apples at the end of the season, or oranges. You know, we were making a lot of brandies, obviously Applejack, the oldest spirit here. But as the Scots and the Irish come here in their distilling traditions, they were used to working with barley there in Europe. When they come here, there's no real barley. Rye is what's growing in the Northeast. The Germans and the Dutch were used to working with rye in Europe. So those families all settled the Mid-Atlantic, Pennsylvania, Maryland. So families like the Beam family, the Overholt family, the Schenck family, which would go on to become Victor's, that distillery. And those guys were used to making rye, so there were distilleries everywhere. Fascinating thing that I learned, in the mid-1800s, there were 20,000 distilleries operating in the United States. 20,000. That's amazing. But every farm had a distillery on it, and it was basically, you know, they distilled what they grew on the farm, and it was sort of, you got grain left over at the end of the harvest, it's going to spoil, let's distill it. If it's snowing in the winter and your animals on the farm can't eat grass or whatever's on the ground, you would fire up the still, make some whiskey, and used that spent grain to feed the animals. So it was more of a self-sufficient thing. And a lot of the ryes were unaged; they were crystal clear, and they would put them in barrels to travel. This is before we had highways and roads and even rivers for traveling because they were so far inland. So basically, aging whiskey became more of a necessity.
Yeah.
To get it from Maryland down to Kentucky might take a year. So that's how they started to figure out that rye whiskey could spend a year in a barrel and go down. The two major states for rye, Maryland, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania was kind of what they called Monongahela rye. Maryland rye, they would kind of rectify, they'd add juice to it to make it a little sweeter and easier to drink. Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906 forces people to put on the label what they're actually putting in the bottle. So Maryland rye had to be labeled as blended whiskey because it wasn't straight rye.
Yeah.
Pennsylvania rye became the dominant form of rye. And kind of the two big names, Pikesville was the big one in Maryland, Rittenhouse was the big one in Pennsylvania, and they were kind of the two remaining brands that survived the longest. What finally kind of put the death knell in rye whiskey was coming out of Prohibition. The federal government subsidized corn. For the farmers to come out of the Depression, they didn't subsidize rye. So corn instantly became cheaper to work with than rye whiskey. And oh yeah, going back to the Whiskey Rebellion, when the government put a tax on all the whiskey producers in Pennsylvania and Maryland, that also drove them south. Because there's really no corn in the Northeast at that point. Corn was more of a Mexican thing that the Native Americans brought up into Kentucky. So we drive everybody down to Kentucky, they find corn. Eventually the switch over from rye to corn happens, and then rye just sort of vanishes. Really until Dave Peckerell starts to work with it, and then craft cocktails. Because rye whiskey is far better than cocktails. Your old fashions, your Manhattans, your Sazeracs were all made with rye originally. And when that movement came back around maybe 10, 20 years ago, that's when rye kind of came into favor. Which is kind of wild. Because when we get into these distilleries, none of them existed before 2010.
They're all babies to the industry.
They're all babies. So yeah, let's grab a couple glasses. Enough of me kind of yapping. Let's taste a few things.
I was interested when you said like there's no roads and stuff they can really travel on.
Yeah, and you don't even really think of it. But
So, do you think? I'll imagine it would taste different than it did nowadays because it's on horseback or whatever they're using, cattleback, and it's swishing around, jumping up and down the barrels, opposed to nowadays it's sitting in
a rick house, yeah.
But
Yeah.
then again, I mean, you're flying all the barrels up, right, or shipping them via vehicle now, so it's kind of the same thing for
Yeah,
guys.
yeah. It
But I feel like the heat and stuff gets onto it when it's going through the like the roads back in the day. That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even sure how they transported it. I know, like, in reading, and I found this, like, if you Google it, Dave Peckerell wrote an article called The Rise and Fall and Rise of Rye in America. And it's a really sort of cool historical record of, you know, how we started making rye, how it declined, how it came back up, but like, you don't even put it into context of, like, the early 1800s. Yeah, there's no roads that connect Pennsylvania to Kentucky.
You
You're
could
just
go down to your local patch.
trails, yeah. So, you know, you're probably putting it in a covered wagon and
Yeah.
making your way down there, but like reading the article, sometimes the whiskey would take 2 years to get to its destination. So if you're coming down the Mississippi, and really that's what ended up happening, is as they moved out of Pennsylvania, they kind of hit the Ohio River, and now you find that shipping lane
Yep.
that starts to ship down the Mississippi
Yep.
into New Orleans. You know, Bourbon Street, New Orleans, and
Oh yeah.
there's a lot of sort of theories that that's really where bourbon got its name from. It was actually New Orleans, not Kentucky. But fascinating. So, yeah, I put together these 4 ryes, and this one was kind of a last minute, and then I've got a special one that we're going to finish with as well. Also, for you guys listening, you know, that sort of Germanic influence here with rye, as a coincidence, the second half of the podcast, we're going to be drinking German Oktoberfest beers.
Okay, thank you.
So there's a whole sort of tie-in of American stuff, German stuff. So this is Catoctin Creek. I actually just met the owner of these guys a week or two ago. They're out of Virginia. It's a Native American term. I forget the exact meaning. This is 100% rye, single barrel, pot still. It's about 2 years old. Make sure I get all my specs right here. 100% rye. It's actually a variety of rye called brownstone rye. And they do a bunch of different. They do an 80 proof, a 90 proof, 100 proof, single barrel.
This might be the first time I've never had any of these.
Yeah, which is
Out of four.
fun.
That's great. Yeah, no, I love it. It's cool.
I put them together, so I obviously believe them, but it's just better to share with people, anyways.
Yeah.
So I brought this in, one, because it's from Virginia. It's different. We'll talk about the rating system one, but yeah, pot still, 80 proof. I know all the proof hounds go nuts over it, but
Who
sometimes
cares?
80 proof is just,
Yeah.
you can drink a lot of them. Especially if you're going to a football draft later on. You wanna-
Fantasy draft, 8-15, I might be
Yeah.
drafting a kicker for a
Yeah.
round.
Jimmy G, #1 overall pick.
I think he's got it this year.
Man, they're begging for him up in Seattle.
He's turned into 07 Mike Vick,
Yeah.
PPR machine.
So the whole point of these is like they don't all smell green and dilly like that MGP rye.
No, it doesn't.
It's a much darker
Yep.
kind of flavor, or at least darker aroma. A little oily, a little viscous. It's that pot still.
Yeah.
A little more nutty.
I mean, right on the tongue, right, immediately you can tell it's different than that MGP.
And it's got a nice spice component. It's just a different kind of spice.
Yeah, it's almost more like subtle, I would say. It's
Mm.
softer, but more viscous.
Yeah.
Weird.
And, you know, for a 2-year-old whiskey, it doesn't have that sort of new woody
No.
flavor at all. And really, I try not to get too wrapped up in age statements. The whiskey's ready when the whiskey's ready, but 2 years for rye is a good amount of time, really. You know, and part of the reason that Pappy Van Winkle started using wheat in his whiskeys is he realized that wheat was better suited for long-term aging. Rye doesn't really hold up as well long-term.
What's like the oldest rye you've seen? Well, not seen, but oldest rye you tasted that was enjoyable.
That's a good one. I'm trying to think. I feel like we've had some 10-year ryes.
Yeah,
that
for
were.
sure.
Yeah, what did I just have? I just had an old bottle of Jefferson's rye. It was a special release. I did a bottle kill of it on my Spirits Guide page, and it was a 10-year rye. And then I tasted something else that was like 2 years, and they didn't taste any different.
Really?
That
That's
10-year
crazy.
rye was. They were both good, but it didn't. It wasn't like there was some extra developed flavor. It just
Yeah.
tasted exactly the same as a 2-year-old rye. So, yeah, I mean, this is a fun one. And again, like if you're looking for something different, it's from Virginia. It's off the beaten path, but it doesn't taste like other ryes. It's got its own sort of unique profile. And again, 100% rye, so no corn in that at all. But pot still, is it good? Yeah. Is it worth the money? Absolutely. This is one of those bottles again, like you and I always talk about.
Old saloon.
Old saloon, if you walked into Virginia pre-prohibition, that's what it would look like. Also, another thing a lot of these whiskeys have in common, this was the first distillery to open post-prohibition in that area of Virginia, in Percival. So 2010, first distillery to open in that region of Virginia.
Whoa. That's crazy.
Yeah. So next, I'm going to move to. Oh, almost ashamed of myself that I haven't tasted you on this.
I might have had this, but it's been a long time if I have. I feel like I would remember. I mean, that's a cool looking bottle. That's so dark.
Yeah. So this is Corsair. They were actually formed in Kentucky, but when they built their distillery, they were the first distillery in Nashville post-Prohibition in 2010. So a lot of stuff going on in 2009, 2010 as far as rye whiskeys go. This is Corsair, two best friends who were kind of home brewers, and they were doing something with science, and one of them said, you know what, it would be easier making whiskey than it would be to make this. And they went, well, it's not a bad idea, actually. So they started making whiskey. This one, rye whiskey, but it also qualifies as a malt whiskey. So this is the fun one. 61% malted rye, 4% malted chocolate rye.
That's exactly what I'm getting.
Yeah, I get big chocolate notes. And then 35% malted barley. So everything is malted, which qualifies it as a malt whiskey. Not single malt, which is a little different, but malt whiskey. Now, chocolate rye just means that they toast it, so the rye starts to turn brown, like a chocolate color. But it imparts that chocolate flavor.
I absolutely love how they have the percentage of the 75%.
Yeah.
50%. I love that.
Talk about a bottle with so much info. You know, it's got
Yeah, it's good.
the breakdown of the mash and the story, pepper, chocolate. This thing has won all kinds of awards. The color, I mean, that was the first thing I noticed on it, is it looks like if you had a black iced coffee and like the ice melted and it got a little watery.
Yeah.
Like it's brown, it's opaque, you can see through it, but it's got like that brown color to it, like coffee. But yeah, on the nose, chocolate, coffee, peppercorns.
That's right. Still have it still. Is that it?
Yes.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay, so wouldn't fit the program.
And interesting with this whiskey, it's only a year old.
Okay.
It's just, I am in love with that.
Oh my gosh.
85 proof.
I don't know. If
But
it's
big
because
body?
You said chocolate, but like you get that. It's
It's
not
like-
even like it's coffee beans almost.
Yeah. It's like,
Like
yeah,
that.
chocolate covered espresso beans or something like
Yeah.
that.
Wow, that is amazing.
Yeah. And
Yeah, it doesn't taste like any other rye.
no, it doesn't taste like anything I've ever had before. For a year old, 85 proof, the mouthfeel, the body, dead on.
It's almost like you gave to someone who doesn't know like much about whiskey. And you say, "What kind of whiskey is that?" I don't think they'd ever pick rye.
No, you wouldn't. It's got none of that sort of mintiness.
It was like a stout finish barrel.
Yeah, that's a good call. It does sort of have that stout finish. Again, is it good? Yeah. Is it worth the money? Yeah. Conversation starter, you know, like the three guys on there. And the first thing I thought of when I saw that was Hangover.
Yeah, 100%. Yep.
You know, and when they came in and they pitched it to me, they're like, "Oh, it's got like a Blues Brothers." I was like, "No, that's a Hangover. Like, it's only missing Zach Galifianakis on there, and that would be the Hangover." Ken John, like, that would be
the
it.
back of the trunk.
Yeah.
Oh, that is awesome.
All right, so I think I'm gonna go here for a slightly more traditional rye, kind of what we're typically used to. This is Restoration.
It's a cool looking bottle too.
I love this bottle. Talk about package with a purpose. Like, so this is Restoration Rye. This is from Castle and Key. If you ever watched the bourbon documentary Neat, this is one of the distilleries they talk about. So when Marianne Brand started, Marianne Eaves, say Marianne Brand, it's her actual brand of whiskey. And this is made at the old E.H. Taylor distillery, which he started in the late 1800s. Much like so many other things in Prohibition, it kind of got killed. And then maybe 10 years ago, they started to restore the distillery, which is literally built like a castle. It is built to resemble Windsor Castle. there's an aquifer inside the distillery, looks like a pool inside that's shaped like a key,
That's so cool.
which they said was the key to their success. There are beautiful gardens behind it. So the name Restoration is named after restoring the castle. There's all kinds of Easter eggs all over it. That cap, which you just held, is diesel. It's super heavy duty.
It's
That's
13 pounds.
the ceiling above the aquifer. That's what it looks like.
That's,
And it's batched. So Peter Thomas and I always talk about transparency. You can go to the Castle and Key website and look up the batch number, and it will tell you how many barrels went into the batch, what the proof is, and some different tasting notes. This is where Pinhook is coming out of as well. And
Nice.
Pinhook is looking for consistent quality, but not a consistent flavor. And that's what these guys are doing. So they have batches, and they kind of group the barrels. They call them pods. So put all these barrels here, and all these barrels here, and all these barrels here. And they pick the best when they're ready to bottle each year. So I think this one is 70 barrels that went into this blend. It's a 3.5-year whiskey. Mash bill, 63 rye, 17 corn, 20% barley, 105 proof.
this one might be like a little bit on the sweeter side because of the corn.
It's got a little bit more corn, so it's going to have some of that sweetness. But even on the nose, it's a little bit more traditional of
Yeah.
what we're kind of used to. Some of those slightly greener notes. So every batch of this will be a little different, and the proof point will vary by the batch. Oh, I love it. I love the packaging. Those look like the columns that actually hold up the castle. All the different hands that go into it. By the way, their gin, fantastic. The bourbon, when it finally gets here this fall, amazing. Something very green on that. Oh, it's nice. Doesn't drink 105. And that, which is kind of the flavor profile we know, now is providing contrast
Yeah.
for the other sort of rye options. I love that.
So different. So
Yeah.
different from the first two we just had.
And it's green, but it's not like dilly. It's not like herbal.
Green pepper almost.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a subtle green. It's not like spicy or hot or anything. It's green.
Yeah, and there's herbs to it, but it's not like dill. It's
No.
like almost like sage or
Yeah.
some sort of green herbs. Yeah, that's fantastic. And again, good, worth the money. All these bottles start a conversation, for sure. Rye number 4. This I tasted yesterday. We've actually had this brand in the store for a little bit. This is Dad's Hat. It's out of Pennsylvania. So named because the guys who started this back in 2010, their dad always wore a hat. And there was a time in this country where men wore hats of different stuff, fedoras, bowler caps, whatever.
Top hat.
It was sort of a sign of status.
Bring that
Work,
back.
yeah, work crews, like the leader of a work crew would wear a certain style of hat. Like hat was a big part of our style and our culture. Their dad always wore a hat, so they named their whiskey Dad's Hat. Mash bill, 80% rye, 20% barley, no corn. Again, Minnick raves about these guys. He absolutely loves them. And they're making true Monongahela pre-Prohibition style rye in Pennsylvania. Do I get any other sort of facts here? So the bottled in bond, this is, and you see the batch year, the 2021 release, 5 barrels. That's it. 5 barrels blended into this release. It's bottled in bond, so we know the drill. 1 distiller, 1 distilling season, minimum of 4 years, bottled at 100 proof. This is actually 5 years.
Okay.
So we carry the 95 proof, which is aged 4 years. So when I tasted this yesterday, as a matter of fact, And I'm thinking to myself, like, I've had the 5-year, the 4-year. I like it. It's really good. It's 95 proof. How much different
Can it be?
can 1 year and 5 proof points be? As soon as I tasted it, I knew what we were doing tonight. Now I know we tasted it, but I don't know if you remember it. But this is super.
I don't think I've had this.
Really?
No. Because I remember when we were talking about it yesterday, you were pumped to have it tried. I think I've had the other one. I don't know.
Yeah, this you haven't had.
I've had the other one.
Yeah.
Yes.
But on the nose, again, none of the green notes that we got from this. It's much darker. Coffee, toffee, peppercorns, but nothing green on that nose.
It smells amazing.
And for, I think that one's on the shelf at 60. So for a craft distillery, for bottled and bond, for 5-year rye, 60's not that bad. And it's different. It's big, it's weighty. There's a sweetness on the back end. Leaps and bounds ahead of.
There's a lot of flavor in there.
Yeah, it's just big and rich. I will say, like, it doesn't look like the kind of bottle I find pre-prohibition on a saloon.
No.
It's definitely a more updated kind of label, but
Yeah, that kills me.
if you're looking for something different, if the 80 proof stuff is too low, if the 2-year stuff is too young, 5 years, 100 proof, big beast of flavor. Any one of these is making amazing Manhattans, Boulevardiers, Old Fashions, Sazeracs. They're all. That's kind of what rye was designed. Bourbon's not really great for cocktails.
No, it isn't.
Like cocktails by nature are supposed to have some sweetness added to them. So the spice of these is what balances that out.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome.
those are the 4 main ryes. And then when I tasted this,
Oh no. It's the board.
no, this is Dad's Hat Rye, finished in vermouth barrels.
Yeah.
So kind of interesting. Same mash bill, 80-20, which I love. This is aged for, I want to say 6 months. Super young whiskey. 6 months in smaller barrels. So they're kind of going for that accelerated thing. But then it spends 3 months in vermouth barrels. And Peter Thomas, if he's out there watching, will know this name. There's a winery in California called Quady, Q-A-D-Y, or Q-U-A-D-Y. We actually carry a Moscato from them, but they make a vermouth called Vaya. It's a high-end boutique California sweet vermouth. Those are the barrels that they're aging this in.
Oh man.
So almost as much time in that vermouth barrel as it is in the actual whiskey barrel.
That's cool.
It's almost like a pre-made Manhattan. Like it's
Yeah,
kind of got that
seriously.
flavor. And what I love about these two, that's 94 proof. We tasted the maple finish, which is in the 90s. We have the port finish out there. I love this brand.
The fact that the maple finish is in the 90s is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I feel like anything maple finish is pretty low.
Yeah, when you get into like those flavored Jim Beams and the
Yeah.
Crown Royals, like
Yeah, they're all
the
like
flavoring
60.
all lowers it. But these guys are keeping it above 90, and the flavors are there. Like that maple was fantastic.
Was it maple flavor or maple
It's
cask?
maple finish, so they took
Okay.
a barrel, filled it with maple syrup,
Oh.
dumped it, and then put the whiskey back in.
Oh, man.
So that's what they did with this. They filled
That
the
sounds
barrel
like fall.
with
Sounds like
vermouth.
good fall.
Oh yeah. And in the future, we're actually going to do a whole Dad's Hat sort of episode. Somebody from Dad's Hat is actually going to come here, hang out with us, and we're going to do the whole lineup.
Awesome.
And I love the fact that they're Pennsylvania. This is sort of where the genesis of rye whiskey in this country, and they're not making anything but rye whiskey. They're not even trying to make bourbon. They just do rye. That's their heritage. All right, this is the dessert for the whole tasting right here. Sweet, rich.
Oh, the aftermath right there.
It's
Super sweet.
Yeah,
No, it's bad sweet. Like,
you get all that sweet vermouth flavor. It's crazy. If you pour that on ice through a cherry on top,
that's it.
it's a Manhattan right there.
Mm-hmm.
Done and done. That's fantastic.
Yeah. I think the flavor's still coming. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. And I know it's hot out today, and probably gonna have some more nice weather, but another month when it starts to get cool, we're doing Sunday Fun Day around the fire pit, starting to watch football.
Mm-hmm.
That is gonna be out there for sure. Mm. Yeah, that's our lineup.
That one might be my favorite.
Yeah, I love
I mean,
the Corsair.
I'm not gonna go off that, but wow.
They are all fantastic.
Yep.
So that's it. We're gonna wrap this portion of it. If you guys are listening, stick around. Matt's gonna be joining us in a minute to taste some German Oktoberfests. Explain a little bit more about Oktoberfest. And if you guys are out there, you're listening, you're watching, if you've got questions, please either fire them up here or put them in the comment section later on. We're happy to answer anything you've got.
We love interaction.
And I love when people ask me a question that I don't have the answer to. 'Cause then I can go
Makes
get
you
in a
more
rabbit hole.
knowledgeable.
No. All right. We're going to wrap it from here. Thank you, guys. Podcast listeners, stick around. So good.